Now we shift to Pakistan, where recent revelations have shaken politics internally. This week, our colleagues at, or within the last week, our colleagues at Dropsite News published the full text of the classified diplomatic cable known as the cipher, which shows that officials at the U.S. State Department had threatened in 2022 that Pakistan would suffer greatly if Khan remained in office and that, quote, this would all be forgiven, unquote, if he were removed in a no confidence vote. Well, we know now this is exactly what happened, and this was followed by a wave of charges and accusations against Khan, which many of them were full of, significant legal irregularities, but in fact, they did succeed in taking Khan out of politics and putting him in prison. Meanwhile, an Al Jazeera report published last week revealed that a mutual defense pact that Pakistan had established with Saudi Arabia may be expanding with the involvement of Turkey and Egypt and with some support from China. So Pakistan's prime minister is headed to Beijing next week. Lots going on. To make sense of both of these stories and how they are connected, we're joined by Junaid Ahmad, who's a professor of law, religion, and global politics, and the director for the Center of Study of Islam and Decolonization in Islamabad, Pakistan. Welcome to the show, Junaid. How are you doing?
I'm well. Good to be with you guys. And Zoe, you become the expert of all things Latin American and Pakistan. It was great to host you for your wonderful presentation. Thank you, Zoe.
Well, glad to be of service and glad that you're here on the show because we desperately need your analysis on these major news items happening in your country. So first, we want to ask, now that this cipher, this cable is public, it is something that people have been talking about for a long time. Imran Khan himself had been kind of denouncing the existence of such a cable. Do you think that its publication will have any ramifications internally in Pakistan or on Imran Khan's case?
Well, I know I've been on this show several times, and I don't want to sound like a broken horse on this, but just to make clear of what this thing is all about. So this is the word that Pakistanis have learned over the past few years, the term cipher, which is a reference to this diplomatic cable. And Dropsite News had first released part of it in 2023. And what they said was that for security reasons, they could not release in its entirety up until just this beginning of this week. And what that cipher was basically the United States, the State Department, sending a message to the Pakistani ambassador in Washington that they're uncomfortable with the aggressive neutrality of the Prime Minister Imran Khan. He had the unfortunate luck of landing in Moscow on the day of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. He had no idea about that, but he just landed there. And he was accused of aggressive neutrality. And within that memo, basically they said that, but if you remove the guy, all will be forgiven. The question is, someone needs to tell me what is supposed to be forgiven, but that's just the way empires speak to their clients. And yes, he was overthrown in that March-April 2022 regime change operation with the open connivance of the generals in Pakistan. So it was, I don't want to say it's just Washington wanted it and the generals like, oh
Right.
no, I guess we have to do this. No, by this point, if we understand Pakistan, the military has always had this inordinate role in the political life of the country, and especially on questions of foreign policy. And of course, that was one of the main components of Khan's platform, an independent foreign policy, as opposed to the entire history of Pakistan, where it has basically done the bid of the United States, including the era that really defined Khan's politics, which was the war on terror. Now, we have to remember that Khan's position against drone strikes, against military operations, all of those got him the credibility that allowed him to then win in 2019. And again, before people start to think that, well, it was natural that the US would want to kind of conduct a regime change against this anti-American guy. No, he said that he will be friends with everyone, including Washington, in times of peace, but not in times of war. So they just couldn't tolerate this pacifist who would not go along with a variety of these different programs that the United States, as well as the Gulf countries, had assigned to him.
Of course, I want to remind people this didn't happen under Donald Trump. This was in 2022, right? Meaning it happened under Joe Biden. So this kind of like gangster behavior towards countries that we're seeing a little bit more openly right now under this administration isn't new. But Junaid, it's interesting because this cipher drops at the exact moment that Pakistan's military is being celebrated for mediating between the US and Iran. So you have the same generals who pushed Khan out of power now being rewarded as indispensable regional brokers. What does that tell us about how this relationship between Washington and Islamabad actually works?
Well, it tells us that that cipher was probably true, first of all, because the relationship between Pakistan and the United States since the removal of Khan has just, gotten better and better by year by year. Better by better, I mean, in terms of the relationship between the two regimes, between the can call it a political regime. It just has a political civilian facade over what is really a military dictatorship in Pakistan, and its relationship with now Donald Trump, which is one of the things people often thought that, well, Trump and Khan had such a nice relationship when they met. Trump could give a damn, like when he came to power, in doing anything for Khan. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That relationship right after the regime change, but especially when this new chief of army staff, Trump's favorite Field Marshal Munir, when he came to power, that was all about trying to market Pakistan as this place where you can, the rare earth minerals, all sorts of, sweet deals that we will allow the U.S. to have. It was really selling to the U.S. that please, remember us, Pakistan. This is how the generals, in fact, have always operated, as well as the politicians, right? So they have tried to kind of sell themselves, and they did get in the good books of Trump, especially when the prime minister nominated him for the Peace Prize, after he, of course, ended the genocide in Gaza. So, this is the unique position that Pakistan is in, is that it has this relationship with all of these different countries, right? Including with China. That's like the most important relationship that it's had since the 1960s. So it has a relationship with China, obviously now with the United States, with the Gulf countries, with Saudi, and it has, although it's been a roller coaster ride with Iran, at present it has had a decent relationship. Now, I think that we should see this all in the context of a singular phenomena, and that is the insane, reckless, violent behavior of Israel. Right, like that is what is shaping this entire region, where even the regimes that we may despise, they are shit scared of Israeli behavior, and they see that the United States is unable or unwilling to do anything to restrain it or to protect them. That certainly goes for the Gulf countries. So Pakistan is a beneficiary in this context, in that the one thing that maybe Iran should have had to prevent this war, it has nuclear weapons, right? And the Pakistanis, as well as the Turks, they know that if they were able to succeed in Iran, the next targets would be Turkey and Pakistan, not because Turkey and Pakistan have some revolutionary governments, but that they are militarily very powerful. And Pakistan, of course, has nuclear weapons.
Well, exactly on that point we wanted to hit, which is that, there is this kind of talk that Pakistan, with its military agreement with Saudi Arabia, is now possibly expanding with Turkey and Qatar. We've seen tossed around the possibility of a, quote, Islamic NATO. But, on one hand, Turkey is a NATO member. Qatar hosts, extremely large U.S. base, one of the largest in West Asia. And, once again, Pakistan is playing this kind of in-between role between the U.S. and Iran right now. So is this, in actuality, an independent security architecture? There is a participation of China. But again, is this really more a response to Israeli aggression, or are we seeing something that could truly stand to contest U.S. power in the region?
Right. So we should mention, first of all, the scandal of this thing that I've been writing about for the past few months, the emergence of, and they call themselves that. That's why we use the term, an Islamic NATO or Muslim NATO. The scandal of these guys thinking that they should come together once the majority of the genocide in Gaza has taken place. I mean, this is the power that you want to demonstrate. You allow Israel to genocide Palestinians. But putting that aside, these guys also, in some ways, come at the heels of that genocide when Trump gathers them all together for his board of peace, right? We remember this late last year, early this year. And so initially this is about, okay, getting together. Trump is bringing us together. This Israel has ended its whatever its rampage in Gaza, but it hasn't really ended it, right? And so then these guys are also seeing that, okay, well, the Israelis see it now with Iran, but even more so with Lebanon, the way it's pounding these countries. So as I was saying earlier, none of these countries on their own feel safe anymore, right? And so you're absolutely right. Late last year, the Saudis and the Pakistanis signed this defense pact. By the way, this defense pact has been debated in Pakistan for quite a while. One of the first instances in which it was rejected in principle was in 2015 when the Saudis launched their war in Yemen. They wanted Pakistan to send troops and to help it. And the Pakistani parliament, to its to its favor, actually said no, because while they said we're willing to protect you from any outside invasion, we're not going to get involved. So the Saudis have been constantly wanting this for a long time. And again, it's not like Khan went out to insult the Saudis or anyone else, but he said he will not get entangled, in these types of things. And so that defense agreement happens. Now these guys, as you're saying, Qatar and Turkey also want to be a part of it because in some ways, as I said before, what it is positioning itself now as this Islamic NATO that can restrain Israel in the context when the United States, no matter how many times Trump will call you your favorite field marshal till he turns blue in the face, he won't protect you when the Israelis come after your nuclear weapons, right? So this is what this is about. It has to do with Israeli aggression on Iran. Again, it has nothing to do with what the Israelis did in Palestine to Gazans. No, it has to do with what their behavior right now. And this is why these countries are coming together for this. Now the point is, what you're saying, is this really about some type of sovereignty or independence? Well, for the Saudis right now, or for the Qataris and other Gulf countries, it's basically having other options in terms of who will protect them. That Pakistan nuclear security umbrella, as well as now Turkey. The fact is this really about presenting some type of alternative bloc? One other thing that it's really benefiting from, the Pakistanis especially, is what's going on in India. India has become morally and politically bankrupt. It is like betraying the global south, betraying BRICS. And Pakistan seems like a country more on the side of the global south right now. So it's very much benefiting from that as well. But again, these are very kind of a rapidly changing developments. I don't see this as anything long term. I do see it as a kind of a short term, immediate attempt to preserve these regimes rather than project any type of kind of independent force that would be somewhat even remotely accountable to the needs of their peoples.
But it's still the irony of it, though, is that you have Imran Khan in prison precisely because he, in his limited way, attempted to pursue a kind of independent foreign policy, even if it was just basically being like, I'm staying neutral in this, right? And also kind of courting Moscow, courting Beijing, declaring absolutely not to housing U.S. military or CIA bases, which to the Americans is essentially like blasphemy. But then you could also argue, right, that after this plays a role in his removal, now the same generals who are in charge, who played a role in his removal, are still building the Saudi pact, still courting Ankara and Doha, still flying to Beijing. So, what do you make of this? And what is the calculation of Pakistan's military political establishment? I mean, obviously, it's not the same calculation of Imran Khan, but hilarious nonetheless that you took out this guy, but then the people who are in charge are still pursuing the same things.
Right. As I said, Pakistan has benefited from a regional environment in which it can portray itself as the guarantor of security in a context where the US is not doing so, right? The US military presence, when we speak about how ironic and scandalous it is, well, now we know these American military presence in these countries in the Gulf are not protecting these countries. They're a magnet. They're a magnet for them being targeted. And so Pakistan is just
Mm.
milking this situation. And the other thing when we spoke about India, right? We need to speak about the UAE. You know, these countries remain kind of the last two like staunch defenders of Israel, and I don't know why specifically with India, but also in the UAE. You know, one of the things that the Israelis love doing is to even humiliate the friends that they have. You guys may have followed
Mm.
how Netanyahu was bragging about his visit to the UAE, and then when Mohammed bin Zayed tried to deny it, then he doubled down and said, "Oh, even my intelligence head went there," and so on. So it loves to humiliate even its allies. So I have no idea what these countries and India, for God's sake, right? It held the foreign ministers conference there in Delhi of BRICS, and they wanted to even make a mild statement criticizing the Israelis. Indians and the UAE wouldn't have it. So again, like I'm saying, the Pakistanis really benefit from this situation, and so yes, I think that the Gulf, that architecture of the dependency on the U.S. and that to them seeming like what will protect them from Israel. Right now, all of these countries, they know it, they won't say it, know that Iran is actually fighting their war against Israel and the United States, but especially against Israel. That is Turkey, Pakistan, etc. That will never fight it on their own, but now are at a point where they do realize that yes, this it doesn't matter how close you are to Trump, Washington, etc. The Israelis will do what they want, and that for them, what is it? Any threat in the region, that is that any country that has any military capacity to challenge it. So yes, it is, Rania, you're absolutely right. It is ironic because in the same situation, in different ways, you can imagine Khan also being this kind of a mediator, so on and so forth. But a politician or a public figure in Pakistan that would also be accountable to the population and that also would want to make this, as I'm saying, not just about an Islamic NATO that preserves these regimes, but something that actually advances a far more like a social justice project within these countries as well. Because right now it just seems like a lot of this is containing Muslim anger, right? That has been there since
Yeah.
the genocide in Gaza, rather than actually projecting a force that's going to be like a BRICS or something else that is going to change the world. No, I don't think so.
Well, Junaid, incredible analysis there. Very important to break down these developments because at face value, things seem very different often. So it's good to have the nuanced perspective on this, understanding everything within the context within which it takes place. Very important. You're a Marxist, so we appreciate that perspective here. And thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Great to be with you guys and continue the great work that you do.